Is there something different about this latest surge of funding from the standpoint of the Ukrainian defense?
Robbie, it is just remains disconnected from reality. It's you can print dollars, you can go and borrow it from China, you can build tanks, you can build more bombs. You can't print people. You can't just make them out of thin air. And there have been, the internet, especially on Telegram, out of the Europe, is flooded with all these videos of Ukrainian people, soldiers grabbing men off the street every day. And I mean, there's big fights. Some of these people have actually been killed on the location because they're trying desperately to fill the gaps of the people they're losing on the front lines. And they're not even being able to press gang into the formations. They can't get enough people to replace the losses they're getting. So every month you look at it, it's a continual net loss. And even what you're replacing is not commensurate with the people that are being lost in terms of capacity, because they don't have the time to train these people extensively before they put them in, because the need is so great. So every day they get weaker and weaker, no matter how many dollars the United States send or how many new security pacts the U.S. want to sign. And I don't know why we would want to tie our own security to that of Ukraine, to a dying military power.
Danny, I appreciate that you mentioned the dollars aren't going to make a difference in the reality on the ground right now. So what are the lessons then that we can apply from World War I, World War II, that we should be applying here to Ukraine?
Lots of people have been wanting to draw that World War II analogy. I've been here just ad infinitum, as long as you can imagine. Everyone's saying Putin is Hitler, just making those people one. So whatever Hitler did, Putin's going to do. And if he doesn't, if we don't stop Putin here in Ukraine, he's going west. He's going to continue to attack into NATO. That is nonsense. It's absurd. And it's absurd not because of any promise that Putin may make or any whatever he does or doesn't want. Doesn't even matter. What matters is capacity. Hitler had an extraordinary capacity with a massive air force, millions of men, army, industrial capacity, a navy, everything that you need to actually have a theater conquest, which he did. Putin doesn't have any of those things. I mean, you can see their Black Sea Navy can't even stay afloat against Ukraine that doesn't have a navy because of emerging technologies. Their army is barely big enough to just take part of the Donbass in the eastern part of the one country, Ukraine. And so you see, with all of their air power, they can still only inch forward. And it's eventually they're going to overwhelm Ukraine. If this continues on, the Ukrainian army will eventually just collapse out of exhaustion and the lack of personnel. But the idea that Putin can then take that and go into a 32-member alliance that has a modern Air Force, Navy, Space Force, millions of men of total military capacity is nonsense. If that were to happen, then we would be talking about nuclear weapons, because there's no way, and Putin has been crystal clear on this, that he knows he doesn't have the conventional capacity to face NATO, so it would escalate into nuclear weapons. He was clear on that on the 6th of June. He also took that same day that we were talking about World War II to he's talking about the nuclear weapons that happened that ended World War II, and that he would rely on them because that's his doctrine. We are foolish if we ignore those realities and continue to push red lines that might possibly expand this war, yet we seem to be doing it every day.
Does staying the course and actually continuing to give weapons create a system where there will eventually be an entire conquest of Ukraine rather than some kind of settlement now that leaves Ukraine functionally intact, maybe with a cessation of the territories that Russia already occupies?
I will argue, Robbie, that our current policy is as close to immoral as well as is unworkable as you can get, because instead of recognizing just the plain military realities, I mean, you can actually boil it down to a couple things. Russia has millions of more men from which to draw for military-age males, and they have an industrial capacity that we, as the collective West, are not going to match for the foreseeable future. And I'm talking multiple years at best. So on those capacities, you're not going to push Russia out. You tried last year, a catastrophic failure to even dent the Russian lines, and now they're only stronger. So the rational thing to do is to seek the negotiated settlement on the best terms that's even possible. And the longer we wait, the worse that's going to get for Ukraine. But at least that's possible. That's something you can work with. Vladimir Putin just recently again reiterated that he's willing to have a negotiated settlement, though it's going to be on terms that Ukraine won't like. But it is possible. To ignore that and to continue going down this other path is to condemn tens of thousands, possibly hundreds of thousands of more Ukrainian men to a pointless death, the destruction of more Ukrainian cities, and the loss of more territories for the ultimate negotiated settlement that'll happen one way or the other. And we don't seem to be willing to acknowledge basic reality on the ground so far.
The Ukrainians, in that idea of self-determination, wanting to defend themselves, are the ones who are caught in the middle between the United States and Russia.
There are two things that are both true here simultaneously. One, we definitely drug our feet in terms of how things have been dribbled out over now almost 2.5 years of war. That part is true. What's not true, though, is the implication that if everything had been given up front, and that would have been foolish because that would have caused potentially a lot more problems. But if you take that off the table even and just said, if we gave Ukraine everything they asked for right away, would that have made a difference? No. It might have changed some of the initial tactics and capabilities on the front side, but those national dynamics would not have been changed by that Russia still has millions of more men, and they have an industrial capacity that dwarfs everything we can have. It wouldn't have changed the outcome of the war. It only would have maybe had an incidental difference at the beginning, but that still the dynamic would have taken place because the fundamentals, the combat fundamentals, have not changed any, and they're not going to now either. And whether something might have been different in the past is now inconsequential because it wasn't. We have to deal with the reality that we have here. And if we don't do what I suggested and at least seek a negotiated settlement to try to get this off the table, more Ukrainians are going to die, and we're going to continue to have the risk that this escalates beyond Ukraine with potentially catastrophic results for everybody.
Is this really then about Russia setting the terms about what happens in Europe and not the United States anymore?
No, it's not about Europe. Russia setting anything for Europe. It's about Russia wanting its security on its borders and us not dragging Europe into a worse place than they are now, a worse place than they were in 2022. This is all about limiting the damage now and not making things worse.